former client of Soul Career, and I think we had some part to play in you finding a soul career. So, why did you join our program, and what kind of transformation did you experience as a result of it?
It's yeah, that's a great question, and it's a funny story. It's so random how I actually came across Soul Career. It was I was in the process of leaving a previous job, which now looking back I can see was definitely not the right fit for my, personality and my motivations. And I was really trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do next? And I was kind of at a point where I was starting to get burnt out and thinking, okay, corporate life is not for me. Like, this is not fulfilling so I was trying to figure out what am I going to do, and I actually went to get like a consultation for to start my own business, because I was thinking, okay, maybe I just need to work for myself. So I met this woman who is connected to a former boss of mine, and she was giving out these consultations, and I told her about my background and what my aspirations, and I have this idea of like, I want to create this business that has a positive social impact, but I don't know what that is yet. Like, I don't know what the product is. And she was like, maybe you need to actually like figure out what it is that motivates you and what you want to do. And she's the one who actually told me about you. I think she met you on a plane somewhere,
Yeah,
something
I
random like
forgot
that.
that this is how you found out about Soul Career. Yeah, no, I met her at a conference, a social impact conference in New York years ago, like
Right.
2014. And she actually lives in Denmark. I don't even think I knew at that time that she lived in Denmark. I came from Jamaica, she came from Denmark, and we met at this conference briefly, just one point in time, connected on LinkedIn. And I guess she saw all the Soul Career posts on LinkedIn. That's so funny.
Yeah, so I think it was just meant to be. That was so random. But yeah, so I reached out to you because I was like, okay, maybe you can help me figure out what it is that I want to do with my life. And yeah, so that's how I got started with the program.
And how were we a part of this incredible journey to where you are now loving this job and social impact at IKEA?
Yeah. Well, there's so many ways that you were able to impact that. I think one of the things is, obviously you gave me some sort of like strategic tips in terms of my job search, but I think the thing that really helped me the most was like, it was really about a mindset shift. So I was able to look at things differently and figure out, because like I said, I came into this thinking maybe corporate life is not for me, right? But here I am working for a corporation and I'm loving it. So it was really about looking at, okay, there are companies out there that are doing good things, that are doing big things that, actually positively impact society. I was just blocking myself in how I was looking at the world. So I think, working with you helped me to like open up to different possibilities. I know at some point I started looking at, opening my search to other places, other countries, remote working, for instance, right? And I had gone to school in Sweden. I did a master's in Sweden. So I lived there for a little while. But when I moved to Denmark, I just assumed, I can't work in Sweden. I'm in Denmark now. So like just even that, just like having that mental block thinking, well, that's not a thing. So I didn't really consider IKEA at the time. But you working with you really opened my eyes to, okay, there are other possibilities. Stop those limiting beliefs that you have, and just open up and see what happens. So I think that was really the key thing for me.
Yeah, what I remember, you were part of a group that joined at the height of the pandemic. Like the pandemic was raging, everywhere was in lockdown. You joined, I think, in April of 2020, and then we saw the George Floyd protests in the US. So it was a very tumultuous time, and you had just left your job, and you had a young baby, and you were worried about finding another job, and it was a very tumultuous time. I remember. And what I remember
Yeah.
about you in particular is you were present every day. You went all in, especially in the mindset, the self discovery part of the program, which I think is the most important. Just getting clarity about what's important to you. Because as you said, you were interested in entrepreneurship. You were very like against corporate at one point, and really just opening your eyes to actually I love impact, and there are places that will allow me to do that while giving me a steady, stable, consistent income and the lifestyle that I need to support my family. So that's what I really remember of that period of tumult, and yet beautiful things came out of that period.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Yeah, it was a very wow, it was a time, and it was, parts of it were really painful, but that was like a beautiful transformation. And I think it was the starting point of this like transformation for me. There, so like even today, there's things that I'm unlearning, and I'm learning new things about myself. So it was really eye-opening at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that brings me to your journey before all of that. So you are an American living in Denmark, working in Sweden, as I mentioned. You never
Mhm.
thought that, living in Denmark, you thought Sweden was closed off to you, but you're doing that remotely. Tell us about that first, and then I want to go further back into your journey into how you got here. So, what's it like working remotely from Denmark for a company based in Sweden?
Yeah, well, I do work in Sweden. So my office is based in Sweden. So I do travel over to Sweden a few times a week. But I work from home sometimes. But it's a really easy commute. It takes like 45 minutes to get from Copenhagen to my office. So that's not bad. But it was because, like you said, I'm sort of like a citizen of the planet. I've lived in a lot of different places. I live in Denmark, but I work in Sweden. So additional there's additional challenges, logistical challenges, but there's a lot of flexibility, which is really great. And I think also the fact that we are in this pandemic, a lot more companies are open to the idea of, yeah, obviously people can work from home. So it's not so much about where you are, but yeah, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm going across. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
a dream of a lot of people. I think European companies, even more so than American ones, are open to hiring globally now coming out of the pandemic. And slowly but surely, the American ones are coming on board too, not just looking at Americans for those jobs, but looking globally because the talent pool is global. And you
Mhm.
self-describe as a global citizen. So tell us that journey. Where were you born? How did you get to where you are today? I want to hear the whole story.
Yeah, my story is one that's not straightforward, but I was born in Zambia, but I grew up in the States. So my parents were studying in the U.S. My dad was doing a PhD, and my mom was doing her master's. So I grew up in the U.S. And then when I was a teenager, we moved from America. We moved to Zambia. So I lived in Zambia for 4 years during high school. Great time to move away from all your friends, but it was now looking back, I mean, it was obviously difficult because I didn't want to leave my friends at the time, but looking back, I'm so glad that that was my experience, because I think it taught me how big the world is. It's much more than where you grow up, or so I got to experience living in Zambia, and I went to a British boarding school in Zambia, so pouring another culture there. After high school, I moved to Australia to
Wait,
study law.
so did you finish high school in Zambia?
I did. Yeah, I
Oh,
did.
okay. And where in the
Yeah.
US did you grow up?
So I grew up in a small town called Morgantown, West Virginia,
Ah,
and it's a
okay.
university town. And then, yeah, so my parents were studying there, and that's where I grew up. And then I moved to Zambia, and I went to high school in Zambia, and then finished high school in Zambia. And then I went to Australia for undergrad.
Yeah. So tell us
Yeah.
about that. Wow. So why did you pick Australia from Zambia?
This was I wish I had found you like 20 years ago. So at the time at the time I was finishing high school, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I had a broad idea that maybe I wanted to do business, and I thought, okay, I'll do like an MBA or something. But growing up in America with immigrant parents, we had the option of one of you has to be a lawyer and one of you has to be a doctor. So my whole life, I kind of grew up with this idea that I guess I'm going to be a lawyer, and then I'll do an MBA later. So I was, in high school, I got good grades, and I was on the right path to going to law school, and everything was aligned, but I just didn't have the right connection to it. So I did go to Australia to do law, and I did 3 years of law school, and then had a crisis of conscience and realized that if you want to do law, I think you have to be committed and connected to it, because otherwise you'll just end up an ambulance chaser, and you really have to have that passion to sustain it, and that it wasn't me. So I
I want to stick
swapped.
there because so many immigrant parents want the best for their kids. And we all
Hmm.
grew up in the generation of lawyer, doctor, engineer, and if all else
Hmm.
fails, banker. Those are right.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk to college kids and parents and say, if we can have an intervention that early where we have a personality psychometric based career path, there's a lot more
Hmm.
joy in that journey and a lot more success when you're connected and love the path that you're on. Because the way the world is
Exactly.
changing now, it's about building things and building yourself, and you have to have that interest to have the longevity in
Yeah.
that space to make the biggest.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you knew very early on from your global experience, you lived all over the world, you knew that you wanted to be in the impact space straight out of school, basically. But in the impact space, as you mentioned, it can be bureaucratic, it can be
Hmm.
slow moving, it can be political, dependent on governments. For
Hmm.
interventions. And so you wanted to taste the corporate world to see what that was like. And in the corporate world, you realize no, you really need a mission, you really need an impact. Because the psychometrics, the personality always shows, in my opinion. You can compensate for some aspects of your psychometrics with training and with effort, but over the long term, over time, pieces of you will always try to emerge. The real you will always try to emerge. And so my
Hmm.
philosophy is you need to acknowledge and honor the real you from the beginning and really generate momentum in that path, and that's where the rewards, the financial rewards are, because can I even say that you're well compensated in your role right now? And that's so
It
important.
Yeah, it worked out well for me, and you're absolutely right. Even during my stint in corporate world, one of the things that I did was I helped to implement one of the company's first sustainability initiatives. So we were, working towards fighting plastic pollution, and that really energized me. Like getting to do that kind of work, and I realized that I need to do this in my everyday. So I need more of this. So yeah, that was another driving force, and I think that was like my inner self really coming out, even in that scenario.
Exactly. So, my advice to people who are thinking about their soul careers is always to go back to your true self. What is it always called towards? And really honor that and go for it and stop trying to suppress parts of you, because doing that you suppress your revenue, your earning potential, in my opinion. So, what would you say, apart from that story, what are the biggest challenges that you faced in your career and how did you overcome them?
Um, that's a really interesting question, and I think I've faced different challenges at different periods, and I'm trying to think what's the biggest one. It's always a challenge to be, like to be an outsider coming in, right? So like I'm an immigrant in this country, right? And the immigrant experience it's got its own challenges in terms of just entering the labor force, right? So
Yeah.
at points I've been very lucky, and like jobs have kind of worked out very quickly. But after my first job in Copenhagen, it took me about 8 months to get another job, even though I had the experience, and I think that's I think one of the ways that I've been able to overcome it is like the persistence that I have, and also knowing that I've experienced so many different things. It's like, okay, this is a phase. This is what's happening right now. It's not going to be forever. Um, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Yeah.
Well, that's a tough, tough thing that I want to discuss a little bit. When
Mhm.
you are looking for work for more than 4 months, and the
Mhm.
toll that that takes on your emotions, that search
Mhm.
can be very, very difficult. And I read this book called The Year of Living Danishly because at the time the book was written, Denmark was the happiest place on earth. And a big
Hmm.
part of that is they have a very strong social safety net. So you
Yeah.
do get an income even when you're searching for a job. But even with
Hmm.
that social safety net, it can be
Hmm.
challenging. So, what was the most challenging part of that time for you, would you say? Because I'm sure a lot of people coming out of the pandemic are going through that right now.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I am very privileged and very lucky because I do live in Denmark and there are social safety nets. So I was lucky enough that I had unemployment insurance. So during the time that I was unemployed, I had some income coming in from the unemployment insurance. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it covered the basics, right? So that was very lucky. But I'm somebody who, despite my entrepreneurial tendencies and the way I've moved around a bit, I do, crave some financial stability, right? And that can be very, very stressful for a lot of people. And so, like, knowing that I was always just a little bit short on being able to, like, cover the bills and stuff. And then the added pressure of, I have a small child at the same time. And then you start judging yourself. It's like, okay, was I being very selfish and stepping away from, a job just because it didn't really feed my soul? But at the same time, I realized that I'm not going to be my best self if I'm ever working in this situation every day. So I had to sort of take away that judgment from myself in terms of looking at, was I being irresponsible to walk away when I have a small child? And it's obviously worked out now. Things are really great, but I think for a lot of people in facing this sort of uncertainty in the pandemic, I think the most important thing that you can do is, yes, it's tough, but the best thing that you can do is like figure out for yourself what's the thing that's going to drive you, what gives you energy in your everyday life. Because once you get that, and you will, if you're going with your, your own drive and what's important to you, then you'll be so much better off than just sort of like accepting anything just because it's there.
Exactly. And what I really glean from what you've said is that career is identity for a lot of people.
Hmm.
That career journey, and I see it in all of my clients, it is about who you are, your self belief, what you think your value is, what you think your worth is, and it's all about identity. And so, my clients that come to Soul Career, it's not about tactics. Like the tactics are a small piece of it, maybe 20% of it. It is about
Hmm.
the person more than anything else, and that search for meaning in their work because we spend most of our lives at work. And what you
Yeah.
did, going through this search during a very difficult time in world history. I remember that when the George Floyd protest came up, that you had to take a break from the search and just self-care during the
Yeah.
search, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
emotion, managing the emotional part of the journey is such an under talked about piece of a career search. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's self-care. It's so important. And like you said, yeah, I did have to take a break. I had to stop and, just really take care of myself. It was such a tough time. And I think that's really important for a lot of people, just to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, your health and your mental well-being,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Absolutely. So important.
Yeah.
And that's actually what we push in the first couple of weeks of the program because inevitably it becomes a very challenging journey. The persistence it takes to make it to round 3 in interviews and then, another candidate was chosen and you have to start again. So we always recommend you have to be working the process at all times in that search, especially if it's taking a longer time, if you're an immigrant in another country, for example. And in
Hmm.
order to persist, you have to take care of yourself mentally,
Hmm.
emotionally, physically, so that you have that energy to keep going in the search.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah.
So, what tips do you have? Like, what 3 tips would you share with someone who has experimented a lot the way that you have and are now
Hmm.
trying to figure out, okay, what do I really want for myself? What is my soul career? What tips would you give them?
I think one thing is you really have to listen to yourself. Like, stop listening to outside voices telling you what you should do. I mean, I had my mom telling me I had to be a lawyer. You know, I had like these different expectations, external expectations. I think first of all, you have to let go of those. And it's really easy when you've been hearing things over and over, or when you're looking at society, and you can really start to judge yourself or start to think that that's how you actually think. But I think the most important thing is to really, you know, yourself. You have to listen to your body. I did this thing where during some of the exercises with you, we did these like where we would you know, try and work against our beliefs, right? So like writing down something that's a false belief that you have about yourself, and then burn that, let it go. It's like a ritual, but it actually does do something, right? So letting go of those self-limiting beliefs is a really good step. And then really, really listening to yourself. I ask myself questions and listen and try and listen to how my body feels about, is this what I should be doing? Is this what I want to be doing? So that's something that I've taken away from the course. So like really listen to yourself, because inevitably you know the answers inside, you know who you are, and you know what's important to you. It helps to get the guidance and clarity to sort of see that, but feel it out. You really have to feel it out and stop listening to outside voices.
Yeah.
Um, I think another thing that's really important is, at least for me, the having the social impact. Find the thing that energizes you about your work. Like, find this something that you would do even if you weren't being paid. And I think finding that thing that you really love, when that aligns with, you know, what where you're going, you get the benefits. Like you said, you know, you get the financial benefits, you get the energetic benefit, you get to really live your sort of like your best self, because you're really living in your truth of who you are and doing the work that's important. um and a third tip, I think what I would advise is also just look at things differently. Like some of the work that I did with you, looking at, okay, you might have this belief, and maybe it's tied to what I already said, but like this belief about what's possible for you, you know, expand that, because once you there are opportunities everywhere if you really start to look and believe that, you know, you can open up doors. And I think that's another thing that I would advise people, which is a little bit fluffy and hard to say, but you know, once you start doing the work, it becomes more tangible. I
Yeah,
would
no,
say.
that
Yeah.
search piece is the hardest piece for a lot of job seekers because
Mhm.
um, the default is to search for things that you've always done and to feel a lot of guilt, like, oh, I'm not ready or I'm not good enough or I shouldn't look for that thing that I really want. I really should just stick to what I've done before. And so
Mhm.
what you were
Absolutely.
saying is actually experiment in the search itself, test the waters because you can be everybody is always surprised by the opportunities that are out there once they give themselves permission to expand
Yes.
that search horizon.
Yeah, for sure.